In today's video, we're going to be talking about 50 different ways to make money inside of Mirandus. Now, this is going to be a bit of a longer video, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I actually have a super special guest today. So Virtuwul is going to be joining us. He is the CEO and co-founder of MOM, or Masters of Materium, the biggest guild in terms of assets in Mirandus. So, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, it's great to be here. My name is Virtuwul. Super excited to dive deep into the economy of Mirandus. There's two things that are incredibly exciting to me about this game. One is obviously the gameplay. Everything that Michael McCarthy is designing is just my dream game, from the danger to the risk to the unknowns, all of it. And then there's the economic game, which to me is as exciting, and specifically, which is what we're going to dive into, there's going to be opportunities for everyone in Mirandus, from newbies just coming in to people that own assets. And one of the reasons I'm so bullish on this game is because there's so many different ways to make money. By the way, I apologize for looking weird. That's supposed to be a wolf. It's the lamest wolf I've ever seen, for sure. It looks more like a mouse or a raccoon. But yeah, that's my avatar for today.
Heck yeah, that was perfect. And you're absolutely right. There are going to be so many different ways to make money inside of Mirandus, whether or not you own assets. And we're going to get into that and the different bottlenecks that will keep you from making money or will make you more money in the long run, depending on how you want to play. So, but before we get too far in the video, I first want to introduce myself if you haven't met me yet. So my name's Jake, and I make speculative yet very informative content on the blockchain MMO Mirandus. And I do this by taking all the information we learned so far and breaking it down into small, digestible videos like this one. Actually, this one's a little bit longer. So if you're looking for consistent Mirandus content and updates, then hit that subscribe button. I'd love to see you on this page again. If not, then I appreciate you stopping by, and I hope to see you again sometime. But without further ado, let's get into 50 different ways to make money inside of Mirandus. So Matt, I'm going to have you kick us off with number one.
Yeah, I'll start with the biggest one. This is really going to be the primary driver of everything in Mirandus, which is killing monsters and getting Materium. We don't have absolute clarity yet, but based on what we've heard, when you go kill creatures, probably just dangerous creatures in Mirandus, you're going to earn Materium. There's going to be a loot drop, and you're going to earn something. We don't know how much, we don't know how little, but you're going to get that. And then obviously from there, the players that are earning Materium are going to go and spend it in a lot of the other ways that we're going to get into. But that's the primary driver of the entire economy.
Absolutely. And so one of the big things about Mirandus that's going to be quite a bit different from most other most other MMOs is that, and again, we're going to get into this here in a little bit, but monsters aren't going to be dropping gear pieces or weapons as much as other games. So I believe Michael McCarthy's talked about how that's not going to be a mechanic. And so with that being said, and again, we'll get into it, gear pieces are going to have to come from elsewhere. So monsters purely will be dropping, say, items and Materium as not going to be dropping gear pieces. Okay, and number two, so hunting deer and other animals to sell meat. And I feel like that's going to be a pretty big one, especially with the voxes. If you're familiar with the Mirandus vox, there are deer vox, and it's been talked about a little bit so far, and it's not completely confirmed how that's going to work, but I'm assuming it's going to give a higher quantity of deer pelts, of deer meat, or different things that come from the deer. So that's going to be a really, really good way to make money selling it to taverns and such. And again, with the pelts, you can sell that to who knows what. That could be used for gear pieces. That could be used for so many different things.
Yeah, so it's going to be sold primarily to butcheries, because the meat's going to have to get processed and then cooked in the taverns, which, by the way, the Masters of Materium, our primary focus is food. We own over 25% of all the ranching plots in the game and counting. So yeah, we're going to be the primary sellers, processors of meat in Mirandus. There's a big thing we didn't cover on the first point, which could also be part of the second point. and that is NFT drops. One of the things that's really exciting about Mirandus is that almost everything is going to be an NFT, including mastery classes, including recipes, including blueprints, including maps, which we're going to get into some of those. But the point is, you could kill a creature and get a really valuable NFT. It's not just going to be Materium. In fact, I think some of these NFTs are going to be way more valuable than just the Materium you're going to earn in general. So really exciting mechanic, and I love that they're doing that. What's your opinion on that, Jake?
That's actually a super, super good point, and I'm really glad you brought that up. So, and I don't think we have this actually on the list anywhere, so this is the perfect time to talk about it, is bossing. So you talked about NFT drops when you kill a monster. Well, yeah, when you kill a normal monster, you might get a couple of things, but I feel like a huge part of Mirandus and one of my biggest wants inside the game is to do bossing, is to go and try and kill the main boss of Mirandus, the Minotaur King. And when you kill the Minotaur King or any other boss, you're going to get items. Now, in that instance, you could get some gear pieces or some weapons or something like that. But those pieces are going to be worth so much money because if we look at, say, the Dragon Voxes for Mirandus, each of those sold for $1 million or more, right? And I think that there are 3 Dragon Voxes. So imagine killing the Minotaur King and having a couple one-of-one NFT drops. Those are obviously going to be worth so much money. So you could become a millionaire just by killing the some of the bosses. It doesn't have to just be the Minotaur King. So I think that bossing and killing monsters, if you have the skill to do it, is going to be a very, very lucrative way to make money.
Yeah, that's kind of like the jackpot in
Yes.
Mirandus. So yeah, again, we don't know anything, but as you said, maybe it'll be 1 million Materium divided amongst the rating team. So it's going to be some really big opportunities. And as you also mentioned, those super powerful, rare one-of-one NFTs could sell for a lot of money. I mean, look at the prices of some of these assets already, and the game's not even started.
Exactly. That's my thoughts exactly.
The other ways is we're up to number 3 here, which is to make and sell potions. So potions are going to be made by alchemists and they're going to be sold in potion shops. So again, if you want to play the alchemist, you'll be able to craft potions. And if you're owning the entire supply chain, meaning that you have the alchemist and a potion shop, then you obviously maximize the potential revenue. Or if you don't own a potion shop, because there's some of the rarest buildings, you can do a deal with a potion shop owner, make potions, and then they'll sell them and they might pay you a fee per potion made. And his thoughts on potions?
Yeah, actually, I've got a lot to talk about with potions. So I know that Mirandus Master has talked about, or McCarthy has talked about, potions will not be a poor person's game. So potions, I'm assuming, are going to be a fairly expensive item to have, and it's not going to be a given when you go out. So potions are going to have to be used, say, in boss battles or in long adventures. And there's so many different ways that you can maybe improve a potion, whether it be time that the effect is on you, whether it be like intensifying the actual effect that's on you. And I think that I believe it was the Mirandus Farmer's Almanac had a video about potions, or we did a potion stand video. I think that was with you, wasn't it, Virtual?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, that was so much fun. And we talked about different potion opportunities there were. And obviously none of it's confirmed. We don't know what's going to be in the game, but it was fun speculating the different types of potions that are going to be in the game. So yeah, I think potions are going to be a really, really great way to make money. Yeah, okay, so let's go ahead and jump on to number 4. So number 4 is to build and sell maps as a cartographer. Now, I believe it's confirmed that cartographers will be the only characters in the game that can make a map. And he's also talked about the fact that maps will not be easily reproducible if you have them unlocked. So basically what that means is if I have a cartographer and I explore an entire area and I finish one map, once that map is finished and I convert that map into an NFT, I cannot do another one and another one. I actually have to go and re-explore that area. So it kind of limits the the production of maps a little bit, which is going to be, I'm really glad that they did that. That way it gives some price to maps. And maps will actually be outdated over time. They've talked about how they want to kind of change the landscape a little bit. So having that change in landscape is going to outdate maps and provide a reason to buy a map of a place that you already have. So do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think my big question with maps is how deep are the details going to get, specifically around maybe unseen areas like dungeons or, little secret passageways and buttons. So if there's a lot of those types of details, I think the maps will be incredibly valuable. But yeah, as we get to the next point, which is, find and sell maps, maps are going to be critical. So let's get to number 5, which is to find and sell maps, which is different than building them, specifically when it comes to islands. And I actually chatted with Michael McCarthy in a Discord not that long ago about this. And based on what he said, it sounds like for those of us that own ships, and I own a caravel, for an example, the only way I'm going to be able to use my caravel to go to, again, really far out islands is I'm going to have to either find or most likely buy the map from someone else. So those maps are only going to be findable through NFTs and treasures or creatures. And that's a really, again, exciting opportunities for players that are going to go out there and raid and hunt, because, again, if you end up with a really important island map, then who knows how much money you can get for that. So again, it's different than what you just described, which is to walk around on land, so to speak, and then build the map. These island maps you're going to have to probably go and find somewhere.
Absolutely. And I think something kind of fun on that is when you say find a map to an island that no one's been to before, things derive their value from, I guess, hype or, the perceived value. So if we don't know how much something is worth, it's all about speculation. So even if the island has nothing on it, if you find this map and you sell it to somebody else, you could make a bunch of money. Or if the island could have a ton of stuff on it and you sell it and, you kind of missed out. So that's going to be kind of fun.
Yeah, no. And listen, we're open for business. So if you find a rare island map, chat me up, Virtuwul on Discord, and I can join Mom. No, and that's a really important point. Like Masters of Materium, our goal is to facilitate all 50 ways that we're covering today, including, buying or doing giving a finder's fee as a percentage. Like there's all these ways we can make these things work for players. So I'm really excited to do that.
Absolutely. That's very well said. All right, now let's hop on to point number 6, which is craft and sell jewelry. And this is typically going to be for the goldsmiths, the makers of the jewelry. So, and the prices of the jewelry are vary based on a few different things. Number 1 is going to be the mastery of the crafter. How experienced is that crafter? What level is that jewelry? Is it, some super basic stuff, or is it going to be pretty expensive? And I'm assuming based on the mastery of the crafter, it's going to either add effects or maybe not be as many effects. And jewelry is typically pretty expensive stuff in MMOs. So with that being said, I think that if you own a goldsmith and you want that to be your main profession, you can absolutely make a killing by leveling up your goldsmith and getting a high mastery and selling some jewelry. Now, there are a few different things that also play into that. Is you have to get your hands on the ingredients for that jewelry. Even though you have a high mastery in something, that doesn't mean that you can just make stuff out of thin air, right? So you need something that brings you the materials, whether that be you, someone else. You need some sort of way to get materials cheap and turn them into something expensive. Do you have anything to add?
No, that's great. Couple of points you brought up that I think is really important. One is mastery. So what we know about mastery is that you're going to have to earn it, and that there's certain recipes and blueprints that will only be doable and accessible if your mastery is high enough. And that's really exciting. And I do hope that the higher your mastery level is, the more powerful your crafted items would be. I think that's a very strong motivator to get people to grind, spend time, and spend years. Because imagine if, again, your goldsmith has 5 years of hardcore playing experience,
Right.
the value of that exemplar could be exponentially higher than an unplayed goldsmith. So really excited about that. I'm also really hoping that there's different levels of metals, and that's something I suggested to the team. And Jason Hughes seemed to be open to it. Again, I'd love for it to be very, simple bronze to meridian steel and everything in between. And then also, I think that jewels specifically are going to have a lot of enchantments. So I think that enchanting items and then putting them into the different swords or whatever elements where the jewels are going to be incorporated in is going to be big. We know there's rings. We know there's going to be a charm. So there's going to be a lot of slots for jewels in Mirandus, and I think the jeweler and the goldsmiths are going to be very important in the overall economy.
Yep, 100%. Completely agree. Why don't you take us to number 7 now?
Yeah, so number 7 is green cloaks, and we'll start by just cutting and selling wood. Okay. So simply just going out there, slicing wood, and then selling it. I think that's going to be, I actually have some uncles that do that for a living. And yeah, I think it's going to be a legitimate opportunity for players. Very simple. What I'm hoping that they do with forests and trees, and we already know there's going to be different tree types, is that I hope that there's some trees that the wood is more valuable. Maybe it's a harder wood and it grows or regrows more slowly. And again, when there's a bigger mix of these resources, like 5, 6, 7 different types of metals or 5, 6, 7 different types of wood, it creates more economic opportunities for players, right? Because you might specialize in the hardest wood, then your green cloak needs to be at mastery 50 to even be able to cut. So I'm really hoping that the economy is that deep and detailed, and it might take a while to get there, but yeah, I think green cloaks are going to be very important. Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few different things on the green cloaks. So not only are they going to be good at cutting down trees, I believe it said bonus to tree cutting, but it also says, let me look it up just to make sure, but I believe it says a bonus to construction as well. Yes, it says bonus to wood gathering and carpentry. So that's a whole other half of green cloaks that is potentially going to be there, whether that be constructing deeds, if there's some sort of construction timer that needs to happen for deeds, or same for buildings. They could be used for upgrading buildings if you have to actually, if say you want to increase the quality of your shelves inside of one of your shops. Maybe you need a green cloak to do that. I'm not really sure if it's just like an instant thing or if they can decrease the timer or something like that. But definitely, they wouldn't just throw carpentry on there without having some important weight to it.
Yeah, which, just to follow up on that, let's go to point number 8, which is to craft and sell wooden things, whether it's walls, torches, carts. I think that wood's just going to play a big role. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for green cloaks, from, again, just chopping trees to, as you said, build things, upgrade things, build walls, build furniture, upgrade, different items. So I think there's going to be a ton of opportunities for green cloaks. You want to one, which is number 9.
Absolutely. So before we hop away from 8, I actually did a video where I talked about the different, I know Mom actually put up a video as well about the human exemplars, but I made a video about the human exemplars a little while back, and after making that video and talking through the different exemplars, I picked up a green cloak, an extra green cloak, because I was like, yeah, these guys are going to be useful. So I think the green cloaks, I completely agree, will be a very good class to make money inside of Mirandus. So let's go on to number 9, which is to breed and sell horses. And that could be stables. Yeah, so the Rider of North will get the buff. I think that having a Rider of the North when you're doing these things is going to be almost like non-negotiable, because they have a buff to everything horses. So whether that be, you know, an increased chance of picking up an extra trait when you breed horses at a stable, or riding horses, anything like that, they're going to have these horse buffs. Now we saw, and we're going to get into this a little bit later as well, but we saw the prices of the horses when they hit the shop, and they're not cheap. So of course those horses can't die, but these horses that are being bred, they're going to be expensive as well. You wouldn't, you know, just have a $30,000 horse and then, you know, a version that can die is now only $100. No, these horses are going to be very expensive. So if you have good mastery in breeding, if that's going to be a thing, I think that you're going to make a lot of money.
Yeah, so they just released horses, and there's some that are breedable, some aren't. The uncommons, so one of the types of uncommons was not breedable. And yeah, you're going to need a stable in order to breed them. And
Right.
it's confirmed that the Riders of the North are going to get some sort of buff. And I think also the Riders of the North, like you said, are going to get some sort of buff when they're riding the horse. So yeah, I think Riders of the North are definitely the exemplar for horse lovers. Let's get to the next one, which is the taxi rides, which is the boats, riding boats. And Seafarer seems to be the only one that will be able to do that. By the way, I really love the idea that there's going to be certain things that only one type of exemplar can do, like the cartographers, like the seafarers. And I hope that there's specific areas that only, you know, for example, the clear bloods could get into because it's so poisonous that any other type of exemplar would just die. I think creating these unique utilities within Mirandus really makes the game interesting and creates economic opportunities. But yeah, the seafarers basically are your Uber rides for Mirandus. They'll safely navigate you. Obviously, you're going to still need to be on a boat, and it's going to be docks. You're going to need maps. And the way, but it's not going to be like Sea of Thieves for those of you that know that game. This is going to be more like a point and click on an NFT map where you want to go, and then you'll probably just reappear there. So that's going to be how it's going to work. But again, you're going to need the NFTs, you're going to need the boat, you're going to need the seafarer, and you're going to need to leave a dock and then probably land on a dock. So that's the mechanics of seafaring.
Yeah, and I have a couple things to add to that. So the amount of money that you make as a seafarer is going to vary based on what you are actually doing. So yeah, a seafarer can take a boat and take you from point A to point B. Well, what is point A to point B? Is point B a known location? Is it an unknown location? So these things are going to be a little bit different because I think that they've talked about how boats will not be damaged or broken. Is that correct, Virtuwul?
Yeah, that's the understanding.
Okay, all right, yeah. So but even still, having a set route versus being more of an exploratory seafarer is going to change how much you make. Another thing is, do you as the seafarer own the dock? Do you own the ship? Because if you don't, these are things that are going to be these are going to need to be paid when you go to a location or when you rent that boat. So if you own the boat and the dock, or either or, you're going to be making a little bit more money because you won't have to pay rent on those things.
Yeah, just one quick comment too on boating. It's going to be, you're transporting adventurers, different parts of the map, and also goods cargo. So those are the two different types of boat rides.
Absolutely. All right, let's hop on to number 11, which is farming with the true providers. So it's probably going to be similar mastery wise to a lot of other things, in the sense that depending on how high your mastery is, you're going to get a buff to that specific thing. And I know Mirandus Masters talked about how he doesn't want to implement a quality system. Instead, he wants to implement like a more quantity the higher your mastery is with farming specifically. So if you're farming wheat and you harvest a little bit of wheat, instead of getting a good tier or an excellent tier or a bad tier, you're just going to get maybe 3 or 4 wheat rather than 1 or 2. So I'm okay with that. I kind of like a quality system. I always love a quality system. But quantity is probably going to be easier for the devs, and Mirandus is going to take a little bit to get out. So the less they have to focus on little things like that, the better. The sooner we get Mirandus.
Yeah, so Mom owns over 20% of all the true providers in the game. So if you're looking at playing that role, definitely join us. Couple of comments. One is that I really hope that there's, again, really rare crops, and we can talk a little bit about that when we get to foraging. What I'd like to see is that maybe at higher tiers of true provider mastery, you could plant crops that lower levels just could not. They're not skilled enough yet to plant maybe a really exotic type of plant that could be used in potion making and stuff like that. So what we don't know yet is, are we going to be able to plant things that will be usable in potions? I really hope so. I think that would open up even more possibilities. And if there's a big wide palette of different plants that can be used in potions, that creates more economic opportunities for all the true providers and all the farms. So yeah, really excited about farming in general and the true providers.
Absolutely. And kind of similar, going off of the true providers again, that leads us into number 12, which is going to be ranching. And I think that ranching will be pretty similar to farming, but it's going to, in my opinion, and let me see what you think about this, Virtual, but I think that ranching will probably have a little bit more money to it, because meat is going to keep you full for a lot longer on adventures. Now, ranching, I think, is going to be a little bit more expensive to upkeep rather than crops, which usually just take water. These livestock is what we're going to call them, because we don't really know what's going to be, what the livestock will be. They're going to require a little bit more upkeep and a little bit more cost to keep them alive. But I think that the trade-off is going to be that it's going to sell for a lot more money.
Yeah, and a lot of that's going to come down to rarity. So there's
Right.
only 35.8% of ranching plots compared to farming plots. In other words, there's almost 3 times farming plots than ranching plots in the entire game. Mom currently owns over 25% of all the ranching plots in Mirandus. So again, if you want to get into ranching, definitely the guild to join. Yeah, and I think it's going to be probably a really rare resource. If you have to breed cows and then feed them and then they grow and then you butcher them, like the time cycle to grow a cow and then butcher it and then be able to sell a hot meal in a tavern could be a lot longer than just normal wheat farming, is what I would expect. So yeah, I think that ranching is going to be one of the most important pieces, specifically because hot meals are going to be critical to gameplay. We know that to maximize your strength, your health, you're going to have to go eat a hot meal before you start a major raid. And yeah, we'll be able to bring some snack food, some jerky and bread, stuff like that in our backpacks. But in general, I don't think anybody's going to be leaving on some hardcore raiding and hunting without a hot meal in their belly.
Completely agree.
Yeah, let's get to the next one. And I'm going to credit my co-founders, Element Grill, on this one, because again, they have a lot more MMORPG experience. So what they've told me is that they expect the weavers and cloth in general to be incredibly important and powerful. According to them, in a lot of games, that is some of the most expensive gear, which was surprising to me because again, I was thinking, some metal, some chainmail, stuff like that. But because the cloth will probably be more enchanted items, they might have some really interesting blueprints and features and utility compared to more traditional leather-based or metal-based armor. Any thoughts on weavers and cloth?
Yes, absolutely. So that is a very, very good point. I'm glad that they brought that up to you, because so in the MMOs that I've played, a lot of times there is 3 or some number of different types of gear pieces. So you'll have, say, light, medium, and heavy gear pieces. So heavy is typically going to be for the tanks, and that's not going to be as enchanted, like you said. Instead, that's going to have just more protection in general. It's going to be able to tank more hits. And then as you progressively get lighter and lighter, that's going to have more enchantments so that you do more damage, so that you cost less energy when you perform actions and stuff like that. So if that has to do, that's actually a really interesting topic. Will the weavers have some sort of way to like a mastery to imbue materium into the cloth they're weaving, or how will that work? I don't know. That's interesting though. That's a really, really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up.
I think that, again, we know that's going to be blueprints. So you might get some really valuable
Very
Very
true.
true.
blueprint for, a vest or some whatever, some cloth material. And then you can only build that if your mastery is at a certain point. I also expect them to have potentially different levels of materium usage that would buff the items even more. So for an example, let's say you got the blueprint for the vest. There could be 3 or 5 levels of materium boosting. And obviously, if you go with a tier 5, it would cost more materium, but it'd be more valuable and more powerful. And that's a great sink for and utility for materium. And again, one of the reasons I'm incredibly bullish on the economy of Mirandus is because of all the utility that materium is going to have. And I think that enchanting is going to be one of the big use cases for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. All right, let's head into point number 14, which is building stone walls, or just building walls in general. So there are a few different pictures floating around the internet of different deeds inside of Mirandus, and it'll showcase what the deed is supposed to look like, how many plots it has, how many decorations it has, how big the house is, and such. And so if you look at those pictures, you can actually see which deeds are going to have walls. Now, these pictures are pretty old, so it could change over time. But with that being said, walls are obviously going to be very important for keeping out enemies. Mirandus Master has talked about before how goblins can come in and raid your deed. So that would really, really suck if goblins broke in overnight and stole some stuff out of your storehouse. I don't know how that's going to work exactly, but if that is the case, walls are going to be very, very important, and upkeeping them is going to be very important as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we haven't talked about the strong hands. The strong hands are kind of the jack of all trades and master of none exemplar when it comes to crafting. So I think probably the strong hands will be the primary one for stonecraft buildings, and the stonecraft buildings are probably the ones that will build the cement blocks, if you will. So I expect a lot of utility. And as you mentioned, if the monsters are a real threat, let's say they could go and kill your cows or destroy your garden, then the utility and the importance of these walls for deed owners is going to be massive, right? Nobody's going to want to have 3 months worth of work destroyed by a group of goblins. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting and potentially critical.
Definitely, for sure. And kind of now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think that they would be able to steal items from you. I don't think MM would be down for that. But instead, I could definitely see him implementing something of a reversion of process, or reverting progress, sorry. So if you just did a building upgrade to, say, your storehouse, instead of them stealing items out of your storehouse, maybe that actually takes away some of the progress that you've done, or requires repair for you to store more items into that storehouse. So regardless, walls are going to be very, very important. All right, now let's hop into number 15. So that is to mine and sell ore. And there's a few different ways that you could go about this. So there's actually several different ways you can go about this. The Deep Mountain Clan, they can see out in the as long as they're in a cave, they can see in the dark, which is going to be huge, especially in finding the ore to begin with, finding mining spots to begin with. Then we have the conveyors that will take you, they can hold more items. So these are different exemplars that you can actually bring with you on a trip. Now, if we I know I've talked about this in a couple videos, and I'm not sure where this video is going to lie timeline-wise, but I've actually created a really, really cool website where you can check out the different NFTs, or anything inside of Mirandus. And so I'll put in the description whether or not the link is active. But the website's called Mirandus Hub, and that's where we're getting a lot of this information. So if you're questioning what the Deep Mountain Clan does, you can actually go to the exemplar section. You can check out the Deep Mountain Clan. You can read some lore on them. You can see what their ability is called. You can see what their ability description is and different things like that. So from all this information, that's where we're getting the speculation. So let's see. I kind of got off track there.
Yeah, so I think mining and selling ore is definitely going to be huge. Obviously, all the weapons and armor is going to be derived from these raw materials. Again, I'm really hoping that there's a lot of different types of elements from, bronze to silver, gold, whatever, steel, super meridian steel, etc., so that maybe you find a really rare, valuable mine, and the materials from that mine is 4 times more valuable than a basic mine. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of different key roles. One of the things that we didn't actually put on our list of 50 is the criticalness and the value of being able to see in the dark. And specifically, the Deep Mountain Clan will be able to see in caves. And again, for those of you that haven't played Mirandus yet, you basically cannot see anything at night without a torch or a lantern, or you're a dark sun. There's going to be a couple of orcs that will be able to see some heat signatures. But the point is that being able to see in a cave is going to be really valuable. And then there's the hollowers as well. They have the gift of being able to kind of sense where the mining veins are in a cave and be able to probably find those things. So yeah, it's going to be a really big one. Let's get to number 15, which is also another dwarf. And we just talked about jeweling and jewelry specifically. The Glimmering Clan sounds like they're going to be the ones that can find gems. I don't know if it means that the other ones can't, and these are the only ones that can. If so, these are going to be incredibly valuable. It's also possible that maybe these can find more gems, or they can find really rare gems. Again, we don't know yet all of the different specific utilities, but I think it's safe to say that the Glimmering Clan is going to be really, really important and valuable, again, to find those gems and then sell it to the jewelers or craft things themselves with the goldsmith. So very valuable. Thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. So for the longest time, I got the Glimmering Clan and the Hollowers abilities kind of messed up. So after doing some looking into the Medium articles and OpenSea definitions and comparing everything, I came up with the idea that the Glimmering Clans have a bonus to mining output. So what that means is essentially when they mine something, instead of getting 1 or 2, maybe they get 3 or 4. So that's going to be almost essential if you are out mining and you find a rare ore, because you're doubling or tripling your profits. Now, if we go to the Hollower has a reduced energy cost when mining. So for the longest time, I thought that the Hollower would actually, they had an increased speed when mining, but it turns out it is a reduced energy cost when mining. So if you were to pair this bullet point and the one before it to get together, having a Hollower to get you to those points or get you to those rare ores, and then have the Glimmering Clan mine those up, you're going to have a much longer, more lucrative trip, because you're going to be coming back with double or triple the rare ores.
Yeah, we actually just released a podcast today on dwarves and mining, so you can check that out at Masters of Materium on YouTube. Which, let's go to number 17, which is transporting ore. And again, the conveyors are the transporters. Transport is going to be a massive part of the economy on multiple levels in Mirandus. One, I think horses are going to play a big role in transport. I think the conveyors, when it comes to mining, we already talked about ships, but for the people that are going to be building a lot of raw materials or finished products, and they need to transport it to a citadel or somewhere else on the map, transport is going to be really important, and the conveyors are going to play that role when it comes to mining.
Absolutely. Well, in conveyors, I think that they're going to be useful elsewhere, not just with mining, but they can hold, they're like an exemplar bank, essentially. They have a much bigger inventory. And with that being said, they could be out on in mining adventures. They could be out on adventures. They could be out on bossing adventures. There's so many different use cases for these guys. And one thing to keep in mind is, and as I was writing this up, this is something new that I thought about. You want to keep these guys safe, because if one of these guys dies, I don't know exactly how the death mechanic's going to work. I don't know if we're going to drop things like a horse will drop things, or if we're just going to a cemetery and then being rezzed. Regardless, you want to keep these guys safe, because if your bank dies, you could lose items, or you could lose the potential to store more items. So on any adventure, make sure you keep these guys, make sure they're safe. Also, another way, this kind of, I think Matt kind of touched on this a little bit, but they could be your material runners. So I've seen this in RuneScape countless times. This is a very, very, very common thing in other MMOs, where if someone is working on a mastery of mining, for instance, and they want to maximize every bit of profit they possibly can. So every piece of ore they mine, they hand it to a hollower. The hollower runs back to town, deposits or sells it, comes back and picks up more stuff, or brings them something from town, whether that be food, whether that be some other something to keep them going. The hollowers have the conveyors. The conveyors have a really good potential to be those runners, actually perfect to be those runners. So let's head into number 18, which is the blacksmiths. The iron shapers are going to be the exemplar, which are going to be the game's blacksmiths, and the profit will vary based on a few different things. Number one, the materials used for the armor piece or the weapon that these guys are crafting. So obviously, the more expensive it is, the more expensive the materials are, the more expensive the weapon's going to be. The next thing is the rarity of the item. So assuming we have to have blueprints for these items that we craft, how many other blueprints are there out there? And you also have to think, if you're the blacksmith or if you're the iron shaper and you're creating these weapons, is it worth investing in this super expensive blueprint to craft these items? Because these items are selling for a lot, but it's going to be a big hit buying that blueprint. So there's different trade-offs. And I think that if that's the route that you want to go and you make a name for yourself, everyone's going to continue to come back to you. There's going to be a lot of loyalty, I feel like, in Mirandus of, oh yeah, this guy always crafts my weapons. So I think word of mouth is going to be pretty huge in Mirandus as far as crafting goes. Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, one of the biggest questions that McCarthy hasn't clearly stated yet is, are repairs going to be vital? So we know that the NFTs or the swords are not going to break because, again, they're an NFT, so technically they can't break. But what they could do is have metadata on how fresh or sharp a weapon is. And then as it gets used, it gets duller and duller. So the metadata changes and the damage that it would deliver lowers over time, which would require you to go and sharpen it at a blacksmith or with an iron shaper. So really hope that that's going to be a case. And then the iron shapers are going to be working with the forges in order to craft all of these different items. So huge critical exemplar in the game of Mirandus.
Absolutely. And something else I was thinking about is what's going to be the bottleneck for these guys? Because, I mean, theoretically, they could just continually make gear and then that will overpopulate the economy and, we don't want that. So are materials really going to be that scarce? Is it going to be something where you need the material? I mean, obviously you need the materials to make the item, but is the number of materials going to keep them from continually making things? Is it going to be a time thing? Does it take an hour to create a sword or something like that? Go ahead.
It's going to be near instant, but McCarthy has, because this is a big concern, what you're just bringing up. A lot of people have brought this up in the Gala Discord.
Right.
I think that the materials, controlling the amount and the difficulty level of extracting materials is going to be the primary way to control that. Also, if there's, again, different types of metals, that will help manage the overproduction of certain types of weapons. So again, if you have like 5 or 7 different types of metals, if there's an oversupply of bronze weapons, than just focus on steel or focus on the next level or focus on diamond, whatever it is that you
Mhm.
can craft. So I think that hopefully there's a complex array of metals. And then again, the extraction is going to be the challenge. And that's how you control inflation.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Something else that I've thought about, I think that Jake from On Chain Gaming has actually mentioned this quite a bit as well, but having the ability to, say, melt down 2 or 3 different half broken bronze pieces into a newer bronze piece, having some sort of burning mechanic like that would be pretty cool because that would help to fight inflation quite a bit. So I know that's one of his main concerns about Mirandus that he actually talked about in his recent video. If you guys haven't watched that, go check it out. He made some more Mirandus content, so that was super exciting. But Virtual, I'm gonna let you take the next one because I know you have talked about this previously.
Number 19. So one thing we haven't talked about, and this is another core mechanic in terms of earning material, and we talked about killing creatures, but the other one is finding treasures. McCarthy has said there will be treasures all throughout Mirandus that you'll be able to find, probably challenging locations. And I really like the idea that, again, the clear bloods, which basically are resistant to poison, would be the only exemplar that could go in a location that's just filled with poisonous plants and get a treasure. So I'm not saying all the treasures should be only accessible to clear bloods, but make, a certain small percentage of treasures only accessible by certain exemplars. So yeah, I think that's really cool potential utility for these and potential way to make good money with it. Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's coming from a design standpoint, it would be weird to just implement a random ability like this and not have any weight behind it. So since they created this clear blood that has almost immune to poison, I think that there's going to be a lot of poisons in the game. So having these guys is going to be pretty important, and maybe this is a hint that they will be necessary for certain content. And like Virtual said, I hope that that's the case. It creates more economic incentive for players. So, all right, now let's hop into number 20, which is the long songs. I think the long songs are going to be a super cool exemplar. They are gonna kind of be like the bards of the world of Mirandus. There's a few different places that I'm thinking they're going to be used. One is tavern. Maybe that can boost morale, or it can help recovery, or something like that. And depending on how high your mastery is, it's going to allow for different abilities, different buffs, different boons, such like that. And also in battle. So since they've talked about there's not going to be any in-game music, any battle music, anything like that inside of Mirandus, I think having someone who is really good at or has a high mastery in music creation playing some battle music, it would make it feel a lot more real. I'm charmed by that idea, and I hope that that is the case. I don't know if they're going to be bringing instruments, or if it's just going to be like a cool elven song, or what that's going to be like. But I really like the idea of long songs, and I hope that they nail that.
Yeah, what I'm expecting here is that there's going to be NFTs of songs, just like the
Yeah.
maps, just like some of these recipes and blueprints. It just makes sense that you would find these musical NFTs, and then those will be sellable. So again, that's another economic opportunity. And then depending on your long song mastery level, if your mastery level is high enough, you can play that song. I think that's what I would expect. And possibly there's going to be a music creating software built into Mirandus, relatively easy to do. I mean, these DAW, but I've been creating music for over 30 years. These basically these music interface softwares are pretty basic, and they could build medieval instruments and allow players to craft music. But I think the main mechanic is going to be musical NFTs.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. And one other thing that I wanted to add before we left the long songs is, will you be able to compound long song effects? So kind of like you mentioned, say long song one has an NFT that provides some sort of offensive boon, and then Will there be the ability to have another long song singing a different song, and he be doing a defensive buff? So I don't know. There's a few different ways that they could go about that. I hope that's the case, or maybe they could both sing together. It's the same song and provide extra buff there. But then you have to kind of worry about balancing changes, something getting too powerful, and I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a great question. And in general, I'm all about maximizing and stacking every edge.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
hopefully,
for sure.
hopefully they can play different songs and potentially, get a bunch of different buffs. But I think long songs, a lot of people are sleeping on them. I know that I did until, I read the description and realized, no, these guys are casting magic through music. So they're going to be really important when it comes to raiding and hunting.
Absolutely. All right. Now let's hop into point number 21. So, and that is become a spy and sell information. So, kind of like an information broker, which I think is super, super cool. To be that kind of sneaky person. I know a lot of people really are charmed by that idea. And there's a few different pieces of information that you can sell or to give away. There's so much you can actually sell and give away. But some of them could be like a good spot to hunt if you hear some players in a tavern talking about this hunting spot, or maybe a good place to mine safely, or potentially a place with just a lot of loot. Maybe there's an island that someone's been talking about or that you found, and you can actually sell that information saying, hey, I know a place where you can go and you can find this rare plant that you've been looking for, but it's going to cost you.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially if there's proximity chat enabled. By the
Definitely.
way, we need to play some more Call of Duty, Jake. You have to play the new Warzone 2. It's great. So there's proximity chat where if you're 55 meters away from a group, you'll hear them, which creates some really interesting psychological warfare. But specifically for Mirandus, if you can sneak up on another team and then listen in on what they're saying, you might get some valuable information. Or, like you mentioned, maybe you could go to some really dangerous spots where you would most likely get eviscerated by the goblins or by wolves or whatever is the threat there. But you can see that there's a valuable treasure or a cave or whatever, and then you can go and come sell it to mom. So there's gonna be a lot of important, valuable opportunities for people that want to play the spy. And speaking of that, let's go to number 22, which is going to be, I think, one of the most interesting and difficult ways to make money in the game, which is to learn Goblin. So it's already confirmed that Goblin's a language. And if you can learn Goblin and then use the mumseds or the never looks, you could, sneak up on the goblins, listen to them, gather some information, and then go sell it. So I think it could be really powerful. I don't expect many players to be able to do this, but a very interesting part of the game. Jake, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've heard him refer to him, as in McCarthy, talk about the language as a language in Mirandus, or the Mirandus language. So I wonder if each race of enemy is going to have their own language, or if it's going to just be goblins that speak. Because we've already seen pictures of different races of enemies. We just don't really know what they are. So yeah, I wonder if you can crack one language, you'll be able to speak to everybody or understand everybody, or you're gonna have to learn individual enemy languages. That would, I don't know what I would prefer, honestly. I'm not saying like I'd be able to figure them out, so I really don't know. But I love that idea. I think that that's super super cool. It makes the game feel that much more real. All right, so now let's hop into point number 23, which is the Proud Hearths and their abilities to cook warm meals in taverns. And their profit's going to be based on a few different things, and these things are going to make a big, big difference in whether or not they are a lucrative career. So number one is going to be the location. Are you in a tavern or a place that provides food that has a lot of traffic? Because if you're not, then you're not going to have any customers to sell to, regardless of how high your mastery is. Now, I can guarantee you there's going to be people that are looking for um, high mastery Proud Hearths. And I would venture to say Mom is going to be looking for some people.
Yeah, we own 12 0.5+% of the proud hertz in the game. And yeah, it's going to be really one of the most important exemplars for us. Again, those would be the ones primarily spending time in the taverns and crafting or cooking warm meals. I also expect them to be able to, maybe go in the bakeries and some of these other food processing buildings and play critical roles in that. So I think Proud Heart's really important example class.
Definitely. Completely agree. And there could be, different mastery buffs as you get more in depth with the mastery. Maybe the food buffs last longer, or maybe they can just cook quicker, or yeah, I'm not really sure what they're going to do with that. But yeah. All right. We are almost halfway. We are at 25. So point number 25, sell mastery classes. So, oh no, I'm sorry. I skipped it. We're on 24. Sell crafting recipes. Well, I just gave you a spoiler. Sell crafting recipes. So selling recipes is something that I've done in, I played a lot of Elder Scrolls Online, and that was a very, very, very lucrative job, because people pay a lot for the ability to make these items, because then they can profit off of that. So if you sell these crafting recipes, I think that they're, just like an ESO, going to be worth a lot of money. Now, it's going to be an adventurous job to go out and find these things, because a lot of times these are rare drops. So I don't know if you're going to have to grind certain areas to hopefully get the loot drop, if you're going to have to go to a super rare place to find the rare place, or to find the rare crafting recipes. I don't know. Kind of going back to the boss fights, I'm assuming there's going to be NFT crafting recipes dropped when you kill certain bosses that maybe allow you to craft the Minotaur King Horn, or maybe not that specifically, maybe craft his battle axe or something like that, which I think would be super, super cool. Thoughts on that?
No, this is basically what we mentioned earlier around finding NFTs and loot drops. So recipes, and again, could be food recipes, potion recipes, all of these things is going to be a really big one. And let's just jump right to 25, which is similar dynamic in terms of, again, getting these NFT loot drops, and that's selling mastery classes. So one of the things that's interesting, and I love that he's doing this, again, all of these NFTs create opportunities for players, but there could be some special moves, special attacks, special spells that you'll basically need to buy or find in the game in order to be able to equip them and use them. So very cool dynamic. Again, mastery classes could be, again, a certain fireball spell or a certain type of, lunging attack. Again, the sky's the limit on the possibilities. Really cool dynamic. Any thoughts on mastery classes, Jake?
Yes, I think that there will be some of these that sell for way, way too much money. Kind of like I mentioned previously, if you kill the Minotaur King, it's almost guaranteed he's going to drop a super cool mastery class of some sort that only a few people have, and these guys are going to be like the Minotaur Kings or something like that. I think the mastery classes, since they're going to allow you to do special things, they're going to be worth a ton of money, because people like exclusivity and having things that other people don't.
One quick comment too that's very cool is that even though you might be able to buy, let's say a whale comes in and just buys all the mastery classes, they still won't be able to equip it until their mastery level is at the appropriate level.
Right.
So that means that people will have to still spend time and, gain that valuable XP in order to unlock these mastery classes.
That's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people are worried that it's going to be too pay to win. And this is, a blockchain game. Pay to win aspects are going to be in the game. And if there was a way for someone who's never played a day in their life to come in and just all of a sudden be the strongest person in the game, I feel like that's pretty unfair. So that's going to prevent people from this being a super, super pay to win game. All right, let's go on to number 26. And that is to sell boat rides. So we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but this doesn't necessarily have to be a seafarer. So you can own the boat, and you can actually rent the boat out to a seafarer. And if you own this boat, it's going to be super passive income. You don't have to be there guiding the boat. Instead, you just provide the boat for the seafarer to give rides to people, and he's going to pay you rent. And I'm assuming someone like that, you're probably going to work out a longer term business deal, because you could have multiple seafarers using your boat, but I feel like, again, loyalty is going to play a role there, where he's going to continually come back to you. So
Yeah, no, yeah. And again, it's going to be used for transporting people and cargo.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've got a caravel, so definitely be using that heavily in the game, whether it's just transporting things or going to some really deep islands to kill some dangerous creatures. Either way, it's going to be exciting. And related to this, let's go to number 27, which is to rent berths for boats with docks. So basically, for all the different types of dock owners, the quays, the wharfs, the piers, people will be able to basically rent berths for the boats and make pretty passive income. I think it's going to be for players that basically want a more passive form of income, not going to be completely passive, but more passive. I think that all the different types of docks is going to be a really good opportunity for them.
absolutely. So yeah, that's a super, super great point. I think that honestly, boat rides and owning docks are going to be a super good way for passive income. One of the few issues with buildings is that some won't get placed and some won't get traffic. So with that being said, let's hop back to number 28, which is to sell arrows at an archery. So first of all, if you don't have the traffic at the archery, you're not going to be able to sell anything. And or if you don't have the the available space to put down the building, then you're not going to sell anything. So that's where these next few actually differ quite a bit from the exemplars being able to do things, because there's anyone can own an exemplar and be able to play, but there's only going to be a certain number of deed spots available for these buildings. So if we're talking specifically about an archery and selling bows and arrows potentially, arrows, I don't believe they're going to be reused. So with that being said, that's a really good sink for something for someone to capitalize on. So if you create the arrows and arrows are constantly being used and never reused, then people are going to have to continue to rebuy arrows. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as an owner of a large archery, I'm with you.
Yeah.
And I'm planning on basically my main exemplar is going to be an all sight during the day and then a dark sun during the night. I
That's
think
cool.
that I like shooting things, so I'm excited about arrows. And I think there's gonna be a lot of different exemplars, not just all sites that use arrows. I think arrows are going to be used by a lot of different people, and yeah,
Definitely.
it's going to be a really important class. It's already been confirmed by McCarthy recently that you'll probably be able to imbue certain arrows with poison and different things. So I think it's gonna be a lot of different interesting types of arrows. And yeah, definitely come visit me in my large archery shop to get your best arrows.
and stay loyal to it. All right, now let's go into number 29, which is to sell armor. And this is going to be at forges/armor shops. So I think forges are typically going to be where the armor is actually made, and then maybe an armor shop is where it's going to be sold, but we don't have confirmation on that, right, Virtuwul?
It sounds, based on what we've heard, that you'll be able to craft and sell things at the forge, and then
Okay.
also sell them at the armor. But the armor shops will probably be able to hold more armor.
Gotcha.
And and to be frank, I feel like that devalues the weapon shops and armor shops a little bit. Like it
Mhm.
makes the forges that much more valuable than the actual weapon and armor shops. So I'm not sure if they're going to fix that, but that's what we understand currently.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. That's what I was thinking, but I wanted to check with you to be sure. Now, one thing to keep in mind is I know I've talked about this previously, but armor really won't be found out in the wild. So with that being said, this is going to be a lot different from other MMOs, because I mentioned Elder Scrolls Online previously. If I were to go out, and that's the primary way to find gear pieces. Instead, you actually have to go to a player who has crafted this armor piece and buy it from them, or a shop. So that's going to be a whole new way to make money inside of Mirandus. It's going to be quite a bit different from other MMOs.
Yeah, so jump to number 30, which is in the same vein, which is to sell weapons. Again, the forges will be able to craft the weapons, and weapon shops probably able to carry more of them. One thing that's been confirmed as well is that these weapon shops will be upgradable, which probably means you're able to carry more weapons. I think one thing that's important that has not been confirmed is, are the majestic weapon shops, for an example, the only place where you could sell the rarest weapons? If so, that will make those shops incredibly valuable. If not, it will devalue them significantly. So that's a really important question that we have not seen yet.
Yeah, that's a super, super good point. I'm pretty sure On-Chain Gaming had actually talked about that as well, because that is very important for Majestic shops. Will these Majestic shops be the only place to sell these super high-end gear pieces? One more thing before we leave this topic, and this is something that I personally think could be an issue for shops, which again kind of devalue shops a little bit, is zone sellers or independent sellers, chat sellers, people who find a gear piece and instead of selling it at an 80% price to a shop for them to mark it up 20%, having somebody just selling it via chat, typing it in and saying, hey, I have XYZ for sale for this price. That's a thing in almost every single MMO out there. And that's, again, in Elder Scrolls Online, that is a huge, huge method for people to make money. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on zone selling?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a certain portion of the economy. If I was to guesstimate, probably maybe 15 to 25% of the economy will happen there. I don't think there's going to be enough zone selling to supply all the needs. And obviously it adds a lot of friction. So I think people will still go to a lot of shops, but there's going to be a certain percentage of selling that happens there. You can't stop it.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that Michael McCarthy had talked about the fact that there will be zone selling, and he's not opposed to that. So, all right. Now let's hop into point number 31, which is raw materials, or processing raw materials. So that would be at buildings such as mills, butcheries, dairies, bakeries, different things like that. So now I want to see what you think about this, Virtuwul. But in the way I'm seeing these buildings is I think that they're going to have a lot of business. They're going to stay very busy because all of these things need to be processed, though I don't think that the margins are going to be super, super crazy because there is going to be a lot of business to them. So what are your thoughts on that?
Possible. Again, with the level of food dominance that mom's at, I think our goal is to basically have the best prices and the best value. So hard to say what the margins will be, but definitely critical. And again, I expect probably the true providers and the prod herds to be the key players as far as the exemplars. And then obviously there's the building owners themselves, which will be part of it. So again, if you're just a dairy shop owner, then you can make money that way. And if you obviously have a true provider or a prod herd that works in that and you complete all the work, then you'll probably make more. So yeah, and that's something that Alem and I have been working on, is to try to figure out what the value is for all these different roles and shops and the entire value chain. So it's something that we'll probably be publishing as we get closer and closer to the game's release. So we've been working on that, trying to figure that out.
Heck yeah, that's super exciting to hear. Where do you plan on publishing that?
Probably on our website and on YouTube. So again, we've done a ton of economic modeling, from modeling the entire economy, every shop, and then Alem has created the entire flow charts of the value chains, which is really fascinating. So yeah, it's a really complex economy. That's again why we're talking about all these opportunities, because no matter what you want to do in the game, I think there is an opportunity for you. Which does go to number 32, which is to sell food. So again, there's the harvesting of the raw elements, there's the processing, which we just talked about, and then there is the selling. So bakeries, dairy, butchery, taverns will probably be the main sellers of food. Whether at a bakery, you can just go buy bread, but at a dairy, you can go buy cheese for the road or buy some beef jerky at the butcheries, and then buy a hot meal at the tavern. So I think that there's going to be a huge part of the economy. And again, mom is here to supply. We're like 7-Eleven in Mirandus, no matter where you are, we're at the corner nearby. So
I love that. Yeah, you're definitely right about that. Like if someone sees that, oh, this is a mom chain, I'm gonna stop here and get a bite to eat real quick because that's how it seems in my experience anyway. It seems like that's how people are in real life. They're loyal to certain things, right? So if they see that mom owns this tavern, they specifically stop and refill there as opposed to stopping at somewhere local. Um, Now, another example of this would be if, say, on-chain gaming, I know I mentioned him quite a bit. If his specifically owned tavern, I know he has a tavern chain, but if he owns one specifically, I think that a lot more people are going to go to that. It's going to drive a lot more traffic there because I don't know, that's his tavern. And so having that kind of street cred or having a tavern that has super cool events and having people talk about those events, that's going to drive more and more business to those places. So, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit more here in a little bit, but it seems like I think some hype or some street cred is a good way to put it for some of these buildings will drive more business. All right, now let's hop into number 33, which is to sell sleep. And those will typically happen at a tent, a camp, or an inn. And people always need to sleep, right? Characters will always need to sleep, so you're always going to have business. And this is also going to vary on location. I know we've kind of talked about that a little bit, but if you don't have a lot of people stopping by in that area or coming through that area, obviously you're not going to get a whole lot of business. So you need a lot of foot traffic, a place that's pretty busy. And honestly, so if we compare sleep in a small deed versus a larger deed, like a citadel versus say an outpost, if an outpost is in a in kind of a in a good area for exploration, even though there might not be a whole lot of foot traffic there, that's combated by people specifically going there for a reason. So if you have a really good mine kind of out in the middle of nowhere, that people consistently go to, if you have that foot traffic, that will be enough to sustain that building and to keep it going. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really obviously important part of the economy for raiders and hunters. But here's one concern. So we know that sleep is going to basically help you recover your hit points. But what happens with all the crafters? If their crafters are never needing to put themselves in danger, then can they bypass sleep? So hopefully there's some additional buffs that make sleep necessary for everybody. I think that's McCarthy's goal. He wants food and sleep to be just a vital part of the game mechanics. But unless he adds an additional utility to sleep, then I think a lot of the crafters will just avoid it altogether.
Yeah. I don't know why you would sleep if you didn't have to. You'd be able to get a lot more done.
Yeah, let's go to number 34, which is selling resuscitation through cemetery. And very cool game mechanic. I love that they're doing that. So here's what we know. We know that if you die, you will basically be in purgatory unless you pay a fee and res faster. But the big utility of the cemeteries is that it's going to help you save your XP. So some players, if they would die, they might say, okay, you know what, I'm done for today. I'll come back tomorrow. I don't have to pay the fee. And I think a lot of players would choose that. But now that they will lose XP, now that makes paying cemetery owners almost a necessity. I think it's going to be really, really important because losing XP, especially if it's hard to gain, is going to be really important. And McCarthy said that the higher your mastery level is, the bigger the penalty for death is going to be. And again, one of the things to me about Mirandus is that risk element. And this is the risk. The risk is that you die and it's going to cost you, whether it's a cemetery fee or XP, but you're going to pay one way or another. And I'm going to add a whole other level of adrenaline and thrill when you're in these life and death battles against different creatures. So what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, you nailed it, honestly. People are always going to die, so they're going to need a place to resurrect. And when they resurrect, they're going to either pay you or they're going to lose stuff. So dying sucks regardless. So owning a cemetery is going to be a really, really good way to make money. And I think that in a video forever ago, I don't remember which one it was. Actually, I think he had produced a video on Chain Gaming, had produced a video on cemeteries, and he did just like a rough calculation, and it seems like they're going to make a killing. Now, something to think about is the location of the cemeteries. So you could have a cemetery, and you will have cemeteries in citadels, but there's not going to, I don't think there's going to be death inside of citadels. So it's really going to be dependent on what's outside of the citadel. Are there going to be big beasts lurking out there? Is it going to be dangerous right outside of a citadel? Or how close do you need to be able to respawn at a cemetery? So if I'm forever away from say the Citadel of the Sun, but that's where I would like to go next, can I die and then resurrect there? I know MM has touched on that before. Do you know the latest information on that?
Yeah, you have to basically choose your respawn spot.
Okay.
So that will be, yeah, you're not going to be able to just
Gotcha.
swap spawn spots every time you die. So you're going to basically choose, okay, here's where I'm rezzing. I'm
Mhm.
assuming you'll be able to decide, maybe a different spot over time, but once you die, you'll probably just res where you chose, and then maybe be able to change your spot later, which I think in terms of deep raiding, potentially placing an outpost with the cemetery, and then the raiding team puts their res spots in that cemetery is going to be a key strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of touched on what I wanted to talk about next is that having a cemetery in more dangerous places is probably going to be just as, if not more so, lucrative than having it in larger deeds where there's not going to be a whole lot of death. Yeah, there's going to be more people out there, and people are going to die around citadels regardless. But I think having an adventurer's cemetery, so to speak, is going to be a very, very good way to make money. All right, so let's hop into point number 35, which is to breed and sell horses. So again, we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but you guys saw the prices of horses. Horses were very, very expensive. So the unkillable horses were super expensive. So the breeding of the high-end horses is going to be worth a ton of money. and if I don't remember, what was the top price? I think it was 300,000. Was that right? Of the
ancients, the final price for the ancients were 125 a piece, and you need both. And
right,
yeah, I think it was only Benefactor that got them.
Is that right? Yeah, I saw that someone had bought one or two. So, well, yeah, but if you find one in the game and you're able to breed it, or if you own them, actually, I don't think you can breed the ones in game, correct?
Well, no. So there's going to be, so again, they just had a horse sale, and most of them were breedable, but there wasn't that many sold. So based on how many have been sold, I think that in general, it's not going to be that many horses being put into the game for a while. Really important point here is that the stable owners are going to be the breeders. So there's like 3 different ways you can make money here. And one of them is, we talked about the Riders of the North. Maybe they'll be a key role in this process. Then there's the stable owners, which is point number 35. And point number 36 is that there's going to be breeding fees for supplying the studs or the mares. So again, if you own an epic or a legendary stud or mare, you'll probably be able to get a good premium for just being part of the breeding, so to speak. So again, these are all the different roles. And that's what's great about the way they're designing the economy, is that the building owners can make money, the exemplars can make money, and then there's sometimes, other ways you can make money. So a lot of opportunities, which in the number 37 is another spot. So go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, absolutely. So number 37 is to rent resting spots for horses. So that would be like hitching post and stables. And if I remember right, I'm pretty sure MM had said that when you do breed a stud and a mare together, it's going to be like an instant thing. You don't have to worry about it. It's going to be super passive income. So putting your horses at a hitching post or a stable is just, it's going to be a must. He's talked about how you can let them walk around, but it's not going to guarantee their safety. They could very well die while you're away, and that would really, really suck. So either you're gonna have to pay resurrection fees, or you're gonna lose your horse. Regardless, you have to go pick up the loot that was on your horse. So keeping them at a hitching post or a stable is going to be very, very important.
Let's go number 38, which is to sell storage. So there's going to be storehouses and then granary for the probably the wheat, and then there's vaults. Now, vaults are the most valuable building in Mirandus, incredibly rare, sold for a lot of money. And those will probably be the place where you can store all kinds of excessive items. For people that own deeds, there's also going to be some storage in your home. So I think that storage over time, as the world gets filled with items, is going to be very valuable. And I think storage management is going to be a really important part of the game in general. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good passive form of income, whether you own a building or you own a house or you own a vault or you own a granary. It's going to be a lot of opportunities there.
Absolutely. You're going to have people like me who are hoarders and they don't want to sell anything or get rid of anything. They don't want to drop anything, especially in a game that is on the blockchain, because everything's worth money. So having some sort of ability to store items for people is going to be super important, I think. All right, so that takes us into number 39, which is the ability to sell buffs via temple. Now, we don't really know a whole lot about temples yet. We don't know a whole lot about buffs yet, but buffs in just about any game are really important because they allow you to do things that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So this could be really, really good money. And upgrading your temple is going to be, I'm assuming, going to be super important because you could potentially increase the length of the buff that you apply on people. You could potentially provide a better buff, a different buff. There's so many different ways that temples could affect things, whether that be crafting, whether that be exploration. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we don't know much, but it does sound like there's going to be some potentially really valuable buffs that you'll want to go buy before you go raiding and hunting. So I think temples would be very popular if the buffs are worth it.
Right. If the buffs are worth it. That's a very good point.
Go number 40, which is to sell warm meals. So warm meals, our current understanding from McCarthy is that they'll be sold at taverns as level inns. So I think that meals, again, we've already talked about the criticalness of it. It's going to be a really big deal. And obviously taverns in general, we didn't really talk about that. I don't even think we have it on the list, but it's going to be also all the games, first play tests.
True.
So that's another economic opportunity for taverns, but taverns will be basically have games and food, and the higher level inns will have food and sleep. So that's basically going to be the breakdown there. Thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So we and you nailed it there. And we'd already kind of briefly touched on taverns a little bit, but having the ability to eat warm food before you go out is going to be extremely important, because you wouldn't go out on an empty stomach or after you just ate some bread or something like that. Instead you'd rather go to a tavern, drink a pint of ale, get the buff from that, eat some meat and get the buff from that, and then go out. So taverns are going to be really, really cool. And I see them as kind of like the in-game Discord hub. I think that that'll be a lot of fun. You'll be able to sit down with some friends, play games, get prepared for something, an adventure if you're about to go out, or maybe that's going to be your kind of like your chill out time after you've been adventuring. Regardless, I think taverns are going to be a lot of fun, and with the tavern games and everything, and again, street cred is going to be super important here too, because say if on-chain gaming or someone influential owned a tavern, a lot of people are going to be more likely to visit that tavern. They're going to go adventure to that tavern specifically because someone cool owns it.
Shout out to our video editor for Masters of Materium, Flaylu, for winning the initial tavern game. He is the master of dice currently. So congrats.
Yes, he did super good there. I don't know how many got that many points, man. Congrats, dude.
And grinded and got lucky. I'm excited for them to release some strategy games, and I'll definitely be more involved. So
yeah, one more thing before you head on. I did hear Manny say, or I guess I didn't hear it. I read Manny's message in Discord, and he said that all tavern or all those pint mugs that were released, all those wooden mugs, will be distributed via, I think he said, tavern games. So it's not going to be, they're not going to be like in the store and you have to buy them. Instead, they're all going to be earned, which I thought was super cool.
One thing they're doing that I think is cool and brilliant is that you're basically going to have to go to earn your cosmetics. So other than obviously all the armor and cloth and those elements, things like beards and hairstyles, you're going to have to go grind at a tavern, get enough copper, and then use that copper to buy those cosmetics, which could make your exemplars more valuable. We haven't actually put this on the list, but might as well cover it right now. Let's say you buy the rarest hairstyle and the rarest beard. That maybe your elf is worth a little more money, because that, I'm assuming the metadata for that exemplar will be updated and it'll help create a really unique elf. So we'll see, but it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, that's super fun. I want McCarthy's beard. I want my elf to have McCarthy's beard.
Number 41 is to sell wood crafted items via wood shop. So to be a wood shop owner, we talked already about the green cloaks. So green cloaks will probably be the exemplars working there, but owning wood shops going to be obviously a really, that's the place to buy fences and different furniture elements and torches and decorations and stuff like that. So Jake, any thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. So we kind of touched on this earlier again, but green cloaks are going to be, or they're going to have a bonus to construction. So I don't know if when you upgrade a shop, when you upgrade the shelves or the display case or something like that, will you need somebody to actually come in and do that for you? Can you do it yourself? Is it going to be instant? Maybe say if you have a green cloak exemplar, do the upgrade. Maybe if it is instant, is it going to cost less? Something we didn't add on the list that would have been perfect for it is upgrading buildings and selling buildings, because buildings are going to have, I don't know if they're going to have metadata or if they're going to try and do like a zip file of NFTs or whatever. But basically, when you upgrade a building and you put that building for sale on OpenSea, you're selling the building with all the upgrades to it, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, that's confirmed. So the buildings will have metadata. And for those of you that don't understand what that means, it basically, like, what are the details of that NFT? And what's really exciting about play to earn gaming is that you can level these things up and that information is stored on the blockchain, which means that, let's say you spent $10,000 upgrading your shop, you want to sell it a year later for whatever reason, you can get some of that money back or maybe even a premium. So I think that's a really exciting part. And that's true also for the exemplars. Something we didn't put on the list is you could basically make money, play an exemplar for, let's say, 5-10 years, hitting a super high level of mastery, and then selling it for 10 or 20 times what you paid for. Because again, a new player that's just walking into the game that has the money wants to save time. So the more time you use your exemplar and the higher the level of mastery, the more valuable it becomes. And that's a really, really big opportunity for players.
Absolutely. You can spend $50 to $100 right now and buy a human exemplar. And then even a year from now, after hitting him hard, well, when the game's out, a year of playing could make that exemplar worth a ton more.
You want to hear a prediction?
Yes, let's hear it.
Elves at the peak of the last bull market sold for 40K.
Right.
I think here's my prediction. I think I would not be surprised if the peak of the next bull market, Mirandus is out, play to earn gaming is hot. You would see an elf, maxed out high mastery elf, sell for $250,000.
Oh, absolutely. As crazy as that sounds, I could 100% see it. If we're in a bull market and Mirandus is the top MMO, everyone's playing it, yeah, I could 100% see it. Especially since those elves have the ability to, all of them are based around battle. Most of them are based around battle. So if everyone knows where the Minotaur King is, if that's public information and no one can beat him yet, and you just need you need more high-level elves to go in there and help fight, if that's the difference between you killing the Minotaur King and getting potentially millions of dollars in drops and not, then absolutely people are going to spend a lot of money on exemplars just to get that. I could totally see that. Okay, so speaking of the Minotaur King and millions of dollars in drops, that leads us into point number 42, which is to just find treasures, right? So adventuring out, you could potentially need high combat skills depending on what you plan on doing, but adventuring out and finding things, finding hidden treasures in places, because there will be, and Benefactors talked about this. He said that he wants there to be chests and random special places that have just thousands of dollars of materium in them. That'd be so cool. You know, you sit down for 3 or 4 hours of gaming, you go out and adventure into this new place, you find this cool rock cliff, you climb up it, you find $3,000. It's like, well, I guess pizza's on me tonight, right? What are your thoughts on treasures?
I think it's going to be again, what's exciting about Mirandus to me is the risk and the reward. And obviously this is on the reward side. I think that there's going to be some really hard puzzles.
Yeah.
McCarthy has mentioned, on the 21st, when it's full moon at 12 p.m., there's a door that opens for 5 minutes, kind of saying that as a joke, but that he's also thinking about really weird puzzles that might take players a very, very long time to kind of stumble upon them.
Right.
It'd be really cool if there was clues within Mirandus that you could find and then kind of figure out the puzzle. But I think there's going to be some really tough puzzles that might take players a long time, and then they'll be rewarded handsomely for figuring it out. So yeah, I think treasure is really, really cool part of the game.
Absolutely. That makes it a lot more fun for adventurers. Like, that's what people are after. So
yeah.
Number 43, arbitrage. So I think there's going to be a lot of arbitrage, whether it's food or weapons or sword, whatever it is, any type of item in the game. If there's somebody selling it for less money, and then you can transport it somewhere else and sell it for more, players will do that. So for every type of resource, I think there's going to be arbitrage, at least in the early part of the game. I think as the game evolves, the arbitrage opportunities will get closed out because players will exploit them until they're gone. But there'll probably always be some level of arbitrage because I'll give you a great example. And in marketing, I'm in marketing in real life. We talk about like concert pricing. So concert pricing is when you go to a nightclub or an event and they're selling you a bottle of water for $10. Why can they do that? Because you don't have any other options. So I think there will be, if you place, for an example, an outpost and you're way out, like you're the furthest out, further out than anyone else, it's going to make sense potentially for players to go and pay a premium to buy food, to buy sleep, compared to walking an hour back to the closest town, because time is money. So it's not really arbitrage, but you're going to see concert pricing in Mirandus, especially for the deeds that are way out there. They're going to get less foot traffic, but players will actually save money by paying a premium because they're not going to be wasting time walking to the closest Duke or whatever. So definitely arbitrage is going to be a big deal. Thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it there. Concert pricing is going to be huge, and it very well could be arbitrage. If I have a little bit of extra money and I'm about to go and set up a deed somewhere, I could pick up some gear pieces here, travel to somewhere they're a lot less common and sell those gear pieces or sell that food or something like that, and just purely resell that food for a higher price. Now, arbitrage is super, super common, and most MMOs that I've played, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't know the price of something and they list it for way too little. So I definitely think that you said it correctly when you said that arbitrage some level of arbitrage will always be in the game. And you could even do that. I know that they've talked about having plants be super common in one area of Mirandus, but then them being super rare in other parts of Mirandus. So again, kind of like you'd mentioned in the beginning, that might be a common thing, but there's probably going to be supply chains where people figure out some sort of way to harvest a bunch of them and take them elsewhere. And yeah, so. All right. Speaking of rare plants, that leads us into number 44, which is to forage for rare plants. Now, there's so many different people inside of Mirandus that would actually use these plants. More than likely, Alchemist is probably going to be the main one, using them for potion ingredients, because potions, as we previously said, are going to be pretty expensive, and they're going to be critical for. It's going to be like necessary for potions. So one question that I personally had was, can you take splicings off of rare plants and grow more? And I know that Virtuwul had kind of mentioned that as well, but will you be able to propagate these plants and kind of create a small monopoly on them, or is that not going to be a thing?
I hope it's a thing. I'd love for it to be a thing, and I'll definitely be in the business of buying these rare plants and growing them.
Right.
So, yeah, one thing that's also been kind of semi-confirmed is night plants. And I do want to emphasize that nighttime playing is probably almost certainly going to be more valuable than daytime, because one, is going to be more dangerous. It's going to be less players, because unless you own a lantern or you have torches, you have a dark sun, or some of the orcs that can see creatures, you're basically blind. Now, some of the horses as well, the new horses they've sold, will have some glow. So my point is that nighttime is almost certainly going to be more dangerous. And McCarthy has hinted there's going to be plants that probably just prop up at night, and then during the daytime, they're gone. So I think nighttime rare plant foraging is going to be another specific economic opportunity. So, and as you mentioned, I think that primarily is going to be alchemists and potion shop owners. I'll be buying these rare plants.
Right. Absolutely. You want to take us into 45?
Yes, sir. Number 45. And this is just pure speculation. And I know a lot of people on the Mirandus Gala Discord have been asking for this, which is the ability to tame wild horses. I think that in order not to devalue horses too much, maybe they're only putting in like 1 or 2 wild horses a week in the game, the entire game. And only maybe the riders of the north at a certain mastery level would have a chance of taming them. And even then, there would be some weighted RNG to it. But I hope, again, it would just create a really cool economic opportunity if you could go and tame a wild horse, if you were lucky enough to find one. So speculation, again, it's definitely on a lot of players' wish list, but nothing confirmed on this. Thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of as you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of RNG in this if we can tame wild horses. But say, Benefactor did just pay $125,000 for an ancient horse. If you somehow found an ancient horse out in the wild that has all these different buffs, that could be worth a lot of money. Obviously, I don't think that those will be able to be resurrected, or maybe they probably won't be nearly as strong as a resurrectable, I think they're called noble steed. But if you are able to find them, they could be worth a ton of money. And so, yeah, completely agree. I love that. All right. Number 46 is to do transport for others, or do tasks for others. So we've kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but conveyors, running materials for miners, that's a prime example of doing tasks for others and getting paid to do it. So I played a lot of RuneScape in my background, and runners made more money than doing most bossing adventures, pretty much anything low level. So you figuring and finding someone who is willing to pay you money just to run materials from point A to point B and then run back to point A and do it all over again, that pays super, super good, because those high level players, they need somebody to do that to continually increase their skills to make more money. And typically people who are high level can make more money. So if that's the case, having or being a runner, or just transporting materials for someone else, is probably going to pay quite a bit, especially if it's coming from a player's pocket rather than a game catch.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really critical. And again, I do expect horse owners, probably the ultimate would be a conveyor on a horse with
Yeah.
maxed out saddles.
Right.
I think those players will be able to transport a large amount of goods and make decent money doing so. Number 47 is bounties, and is something that my co-founder and good friend Grill has mentioned a few times on the Mirandus suggestion board. And that's, you could create a smart contract feature and really hope that they build a lot of powerful smart contracts in Mirandus where if you accomplish X, you get Y. For an example, harvest 100 wheat, you get 10 materium, things like that. And that would enable all the building owners or deed owners to create bounty boards and allow like any random player to go and make some materium. So I think really powerful feature if they build it, and I hope that they do. Thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another thing. This is another example where money's potentially coming from a player rather than the game. And typically, if money comes from a player, it does pay better, and at least in my experience in other video games. So with that being said, Mom could absolutely hire somebody to, they're looking for, say, 1,000 wheat. If someone brings in 1,000 wheat, they get paid X amount of dollars because Mom is waiting on that wheat to craft more bread for one of their taverns or something like that. So bounties are going to be super, super cool. And Mirandus Masters also mentioned there's not going to be any in-game quests. That's correct, right? There's not going to be any?
That's our current understanding. So
Cool.
this would enable players to potentially create quests, which would be really cool. So
Yes, exactly. And these players are creating quests, which is, again, going to come from the players' pockets instead of the game, which typically does pay better. And that leads us into number 48, which is to be a scholar. So as a scholar, you typically don't pay money to get into the game. Or maybe if you do, it's a lot less than buying the actual price of an NFT. So if you're wanting to get into Mirandus and you don't want to spend any money whatsoever or spend very little money, being a scholar is a perfect opportunity to do that because you can spend nothing or little to nothing, get into the game, earn money in the game or earn resources in the game, pay the person who owns the NFT that you're using, the exemplar that you're using, pay them with something that you earn that day, and keep the rest. So you've made money just by playing. And I think that's the beauty of NFT gaming that a lot of people don't see yet because it hasn't been implemented perfectly yet. So I'm really, really excited for this exemplar renting system, and I hope that they absolutely nail it out of the park because this has the potential to be amazing.
Yeah, so just a distinction in my mind. So scholars, when I think of scholars, it'll be, players that own a lot of assets, literally hiring people from probably lower income countries to play full-time or part-time. So literally people will be paid to play games. I think that's most likely going to happen if the Mirandus economy is healthy enough and if there's enough money for the players to earn, a few dollars an hour playing Mirandus, and they'd probably play for free. But if they can make a few bucks doing so, they'll be happy and excited. And
Absolutely.
let's jump to 49, which is to rent exemplars, which to me is very different. So renting exemplars has been confirmed, which is incredibly exciting. A lot of people have complained that they're concerned there's only 50,000 exemplars and that's it. But if you run the math, let's say on average, I think that an exemplar can be rented anywhere from 4 to 6 times a day. So let's say it's 5. That's 250,000 people a day, technically, that could be using these 50,000 exemplars if it was different people renting it. And then let's say people are not playing every day. They're playing maybe 3 or 4 times a week. So you could have almost like 500,000 players coming in and out, renting exemplars and playing the game. So that's a lot of people. And then I think as they get closer to maxing out that system, then McCarthy has said they'll release some vanilla exemplars, which have no special abilities. But for those of us that own exemplars, I think the ability to rent them out will be a great economic opportunity if there's enough demand from the player base. But I know you got some notes here on the souls. You want to mention that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the exemplar souls are going to be really, really helpful for exemplar owners renting them out, and also for people who are just playing the game and not owning. So renters or rentees. I don't know what the word is there, but um, every wallet is going to keep their own progress. So if I own an exemplar and I rent it to you, and you go out and you make a ton of progress, you do super, super good, and our contract's up and the exemplar comes back to me. You keep your progress on your green cloak, which you went and you chop down a bunch of trees. You keep that mastery level. It doesn't come back to me, which I think is going to be really, really helpful, especially on my end, because say for instance I rent it out to you and you go out and you're cutting down trees, and then all of a sudden a minotaur comes out and kills you. Oh no. Well, now you lose the experience instead of me. So it's a little bit of insurance for the person who's renting out the exemplar, and it's also a lot more incentive for the person who is renting the exemplar to do well and to not die and to play the game as it's supposed to be, because everything is on your shoulders. All right, so now we're at number 50. We're finally here, an hour, almost 2 hours in. But the last one is to rent deed spots. So renting out deed spots is going to be extremely good money, because there are, I did the math. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but there's a very small percentage of buildings building spots that exist compared to the number of buildings. So I think it's like 40% of buildings can be placed at one time, and that's 5x5 buildings. And the number just gets lower and lower and lower. So not all buildings are going to be able to be placed at the same time. So with that being said, owning a spot that a building can be placed can be worth a lot of money, especially in some bigger cities, bigger deeds that have a lot more traffic. Those deed spots are going to be worth a lot more money because it's going to be bringing a lot more people.
Yeah, obviously, we're talking about being a landlord in Mirandus from the homesteads, which I don't expect too many homestead owners to rent out plots, but you never know, up to the Citadel owners. And yeah, I think it's going to be a really, really big opportunity for the deed owners. Some deed owners, such as myself, are also own the majority of their buildings, but in MOM, we have some players that own a lot of deeds and they've already decided that they're going to be renting out building plots. So I think the deed owners in Mirandus have the most power by a long shot, primarily because there's so few of them and there's so few building plots or spots in comparison to the number of buildings. So they're going to really have a lot of power in negotiation. And there's a warning here for people that own buildings and don't own a deed. Be careful, because I think a lot of people will be holding a building with no place to put it. So, be wary of that for sure.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good warning to put in there, because I kind of at first I had the idea that I could buy buildings and I could own an archery and I could sell bows that I had, but in all reality I didn't have a place to put my deed. Now I could find a place to put my deed, but then I'm gonna have to worry about rent and there's several variables that are unknown. So it's recommended that you own a deed spot. And I actually just remembered I had this paper next to me that has some rough statistics on the percentage of buildings that are going to be, here it is, filled. Okay, so if we're looking at 5x5 buildings, and this was I think before a couple other buildings came out, so these aren't even completely accurate, but only 44% of 5x5s can be placed down at once. Only 32% of 10x10s can be put down. 26% of 10x20s can be placed. 15% of 20x20s can be placed. Now, that does not include citadels, because we don't know the dimensions of citadels. We don't know what they can hold and such. But still, those are very, very low percentages. So with that being said, just do yourself a favor and think ahead if you own a building and not a deed, or really try and look into some land.
Yeah, we're going to be creating some opportunities again for Masters of Materium members that need some building spots actually in the next couple of weeks. So if you own a building, come join.
Heck yeah. Well, we're finally there. We did all 50. So if you guys have some that we missed that you think would be a really good opportunity to make money inside Mirandus, then drop a comment below. If you've stayed thus far, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for staying with us for the past couple hours. It's been a fun time.
Virtual.
No, it's been great. Yeah, it's going to be probably a lot more opportunities that will emerge. I think McCarthy is going to continue adding more and more depth. I was chatting with Jason Hughes privately, and he told me that they're just expanding. They're planning on expanding content continually. So I think they want to get the basic game out as they promised, and then add more and more things. So I don't know if it's going to be more building types or just more opportunities, but I think it's going to be an incredible thing. And like you said, there's probably some we forgot. So yeah, again, no matter what type of gameplay that you're looking at doing, there's going to be an opportunity for you. And I think when you're looking at play to earn economies, I think something that's become evidently clear is you need complexity. If the economy is too simple and it's one resource and it's one mechanic, then it's just going to get exploited to death, probably by whales. But here, you're going to have so many different types of opportunities that I think whether you're a new player coming in that just stumbles upon a really valuable NFT and you sell it for $1,000, to people that own a bunch of assets that really max out their capabilities and everything in between. So it's incredibly exciting to me.
It is super exciting, especially to know that this isn't a video game. This is an MMO that sounds fun to play. It's one thing if the game, if it's a money game first, but McCarthy and the team are really trying to build a game that is a game first and has the potential to earn with it. So a couple last things before we end the video. Number one, if you're looking for a home guild inside of Mirandus, seriously check out Masters of Materium. I know we've mentioned them quite a bit in this video. There's so many different opportunities for inclusion, for just a place to live, to have fun, and to feel at home with them. Check out their Discord. It's I'll make sure to include it in the link to the description, or I'll include the link to the description. And yeah, and then the second thing that I want to throw up is I'm not sure if it's going to be live at the time of this video, but I have a super cool website that I mentioned previously that's going to be published very soon. So again, check out the description to see if that's live or not. I've got a couple videos writing on that. So as soon as that's published, it's got a ton of super cool information on it. You can go through, you can read all about the different exemplars. I updated it with medium article accuracy. So I went back and I made sure that all of the medium articles that were first released about each exemplar were up to date with the description of the exemplar, with the building, with the deeds and everything. I even included some tavern tales, which is kind of just made up lore. It's not official. It's not from Gala, but it's still really fun to read through and hear different beefs between exemplars. So regardless, thank you guys so much for watching, and I appreciate y'all listening this long. So catch you guys in the next one. Peace.